Hey guys, thanks for checking out the video on compound miter saw. Our particular saw is the DeWalt PW716 12-inch double bevel compound miter saw. A couple things I want to point out before we get into the operation of the saw itself is a couple of the safety features. The first one is the guard that goes over the blade, and this guard does move it no matter the position of the saw. It keeps you from interacting with the saw this way. Now you can't come into the saw from behind or below, so that you definitely need to be mindful of that. This will not prevent you from bringing the saw down on top of your hand, only from you coming in from the side or the top. Another safety feature this has is there are two lines on the deck, one here and one here, and those are designed to let you know where to not place your hand to keep yourself safe in operation of this saw. So this saw is in the locked position right now. So to unlock it, we push down on the D handle, then there's a pin right here on the back of the saw. We pull that out, and then it releases the saw into its upward position. Now with it upwards, you see this little black switch down here. This is the trigger which activates our saw. So our saw right now is not plugged in, so we can point out a couple other things. The important thing to remember about this saw on all saws is that it does have a kerf width, and that kerf width is the width that the saw takes out of the material. Usually saws are about 1/8 of an inch. So when we take a look at that saw, we can raise this shield up. And the only time we should ever raise this up is when the saw is unplugged and we're inspecting the blade or changing the blade or something along those lines. So that you can take a look at the blade and you can see that tooth width of that blade that's going to determine that kerf width in our material. So the reason this is called a double bevel saw is that you have two different axes that you can move this saw. The first one is down here on the deck. And you see that there's two locking mechanisms, one here and one here. Now this one there's several locking positions around this, and this trigger allows you to move from one lock position to the next. So and as you're moving that, you can hear that piece as it clips into place. Now there are three settings which you will primarily use this saw. 45 degrees here, 22.5 degrees here, and 0. And you have those stops and a few others, but those are the three most important ones. Now you can see that saw is in that stop. Now if you wanted to make a cut for whatever reason that's not in one of those locked positions, for example, if you wanted to make a cut at 25 degrees, you would move this to the indicator arrow inside here points at 25 degrees. Now you're not locked, so this will still rotate until you push down on this locking lever. When you push down on this locking lever, then the saw won't move. So if you're in one of those locked positions, you don't need to use this top lock. You can, but it's not required. Only when you're outside of one of those locked positions. Now the other bevel that you can adjust is the way the saw lays over. Now before you make this adjustment, you want to make sure that you're holding on to the saw. And then in the back there's a 3-flange hand nut, which when you loosen, it allows you to lay the saw over. So this saw will go 45 degrees down. Now if you want to make a cut at anything other than 45 degrees, you're just going to have to hold it looking at your indicator and then lock it in place. But no matter what angle that you're cutting at, you always need to make sure that this is locked in place. Now something to be mindful of, and I've already moved this fence out of the way here, is that when you make a cut at 45, you may come in contact with your fence, because the normal position of this fence is all the way in. And there's a wing nut in the back that lets you make that adjustment. So you always need to check that whether your saw is going to hit your fence or not before you make a cut, before you power up that saw. And then you can slide it out of the way, and once you know that you have the good clearance that you need, then you can lock your fence back in place. And your fence is really what's going to help you keep your material stable as you're operating the tool. So those are the two bevels. If you have any questions about those, come and find a facilitator, and we can walk you through how to use that. Now, as true with all of our tools are locked out. So every tool is going to have a box of some sort that's preventing you from accessing it. So if you want to use this tool, you would take your trust card, take it to a facilitator or shop aide, and say, hey, I would like to use the chop saw. In this particular case, it's number 4 on the saw, number 4 on the lock, and you would ask for key number 4. So if you unlock that just like you would any other key lock, open up that box. So instead of just laying this down for you to lose or try to keep up with, we're just going to put this box around the cord itself and then lock it back in place. Then the only thing that you really need to keep up with the key, and I tend to stick them in my back pocket. So We're going to connect this to our power source. Now, if you're able to get one close to one of the drops or one of the plugs on the exterior walls, that's fine. If you're not able to get that close, you can ask the facilitator or shop aide for an extension cord, and we can get one of those for you. So, we're all connected to a power supply. We're going to drop this down and put it in its lock position, because every time we plug into it, we want to make sure it's operational. Sounds good. Nice and loud. So we know that our saw is operational. We know everything's good. So now it's time to make our cut. So when we make our cut, we're going to have our line marked on our material. So one thing to keep in mind is we're cutting small pieces of material. We might not be able to stay outside of that safe cutting zone, which is where we need to be. So if you have something like this and we're looking at this saw, there's no way for me to really, I could maybe cut a little bit off the end, but trying to cut this in half, there's no way I could do this for this piece of wood in a safe way. If you do find yourself in a cut like this and you really need this piece of material, you would ask a facilitator, someone with more experience with the saw, that can make that more dangerous cut. This is not something that you should be making. So in the case where your material is too small, your best bet really is to just get a larger piece of material and cut your piece out of that larger piece of material. So I have this one marked, but one thing that I like to do with all my pieces is, so I have my line here, but I may not remember which side that I want to keep, which side that is the important side. So what I'll do is I'll take my pencil and I'll mark an X on the side I don't want to keep. So that way when I'm lining my blade up, I know that my kerf is going to go on this side of the line, so that's going to keep this measurement true. So I'm going to bring this over to the saw, and as I drop my saw blade down, the shield is going to lift up, and then I'm lining this up right now so that the edge of the saw tooth is right on that line. So once I have that in place, I'm going to stabilize this piece outside of this line and then make the cut. When I make this cut, I'm going to squeeze the trigger outside of the material, let the blade get up to full speed, move it all the way through the material and out of the material before I let it go. And the reason I do that is, when you activate that saw, you'll see that the saw will kick up or down depending on whether you're activating or deactivating the saw. So we want to make sure that we're away from our material when we're turning the saw on or off. That way we don't accidentally bump our material or do something that may damage the motor of the saw. So we never want to be in the material unless the saw is operating at that full speed. So let's go ahead and make our first cut. And I hope you saw the saw bounce there when I was turning the motor on and off. Just something that you need to be mindful of. So as you're cutting, you're going to generate little pieces of material. If you're making a lot of cuts, you may just want to take those pieces and throw them under the saw just to keep them out of your way. But ultimately, if it's too small to keep, too small to do anything with, we're just going to want to throw it away. Then we have our piece. We have our nice clean cut because we took our time with the saw. And if you look very carefully, you can just see just remnants of that pencil, which means that we got exactly the cut exactly where we wanted it to be. That's it for the compound miter saw. If you have any questions, come find a facilitator. Other than that, keep up the good work. Thanks.